Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. For those of you that are joining us on YouTube, you might notice that the audio isn't synced up. That's because you're listening to VoiceOver Luke. Unfortunately, none of the sound from this intro was picked up by my microphone, so I'm here delivering it again to you in post production. But today, my guest is a good friend of mine, teammate Angus Cook. We met in, I want to say, 2020, playing for the Tamworth Phoenix. On opposite sides of the ball, but always had a mutual respect for each other and how much of an impact either of us could make to a game. I've never really had many huge conversations with Angus. No deep, meaningful conversations between us yet, but I've always respected his integrity and always known that he's a really good guy and a great leader. And since he has started his own podcast, which is somewhat the inspiration for this, I've been keeping an eye on it and getting direction from him, which I've really appreciated. But let me tell you a little bit about Angus that you might not know. At the age of 10, he won the Surrey Sports Award, came second in his first and only solo sailing race out of two competitors, had the lap record at Daytona go-karting track for about a month. Sources tell me that Lewis visited the track a month after that. In a single rugby season, he tore his MCL, broke his foot, burst an eardrum, broke his ankle, and in that same season, he scored 21 points kicking conversions and penalties with said broken foot. He's also a skilled engineer that can design and print miscellaneous accessories for Riddell helmets. Other brands may be available, but I'm not quite up to date with his current 3D printing repertoire. So, without further ado, let's get into the podcast. Angus, thank you for joining me on the Neill podcast. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
No worries, I'm great, mate. It's nice to have a catch up and see a lovely face again.
I appreciate that. Well, please don't judge the low tech version of this. I know you're running a much higher quality operation than this, but I just had to get you on.
You'd be surprised,
to share
honestly.
Some wisdom.
Quality wise, it's not what it looks like. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all made to look better than it is. But you're getting there, and the important thing is making the first step, and you're doing that, which is sick.
Appreciate that. Well, mate, it looks good. It's really high quality. I've watched a few episodes and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. Especially we had a guy that was struggling with his ADHD, so I resonated with that episode a lot personally.
Yeah.
But if anyone hasn't already given the Mindsets podcast a listen, please do check it out. It's the message behind it is really good. And
really
it's something that I think that people need nowadays.
Big time. Yeah, I think the more I've gone into it, I think one of the nice things is that you do get positive feedback, and like even then when you're saying you resonate with that means a lot, and ultimately the goal is to share as many different stories as possible, connect with as many different people as possible, so that everyone feels a bit more heard, and there's some advice out there for people going through all kinds of different stuff, whether that is related to sport or not, but there's kind of a general theme around sport because that's one of my biggest interests, so it's easier to do.
Yeah, I feel that's similar to like the guests I've had on. Most of them have been sport orientated because it's just my audience at the moment. Athletes and things like that, and it's just where our circle is now. I'm sure we'll have a few more CrossFit athletes coming on soon onto your podcast now that you're switching roles.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one, really. I literally just had a message from someone saying, "Oh, it's not CrossFit," and then no shade. And the thing is, I still hide behind the fact that High Rocks isn't CrossFit. I mean, it basically is. I can't lie. It is. It's just more body weight and more cardio based. But yeah, it's a bit of a change up, I think. Obviously, and I'm sure we'll kind of get into this. I stopped playing American football. And a lot of my training and that sort of thing had been quite focused on performing better in that sense. And then when I stopped doing that, it was like, okay, it was a bit daunting because it was like, well, what am I training for? But then at the same time, it was like, I can train for anything I like. it kind of opened the book and allowed me to sort of explore new avenues. And I've ended up just starting to do a little bit of everything, just give everything a go and see what sticks, effectively.
Exactly, man. There's so many people that like talk to me and they're like, oh yeah, he's getting shabby, he's going to the gym. I was like, you don't. I was like, if I didn't play American football, I would not go to the gym because I don't enjoy it, especially training by myself. I'd play squash 7 times a week, play five-a-side football. I was like, whatever exercise you enjoy doing, do that.
Yeah,
Because there's
exactly.
nothing worse than doing it. But if you've got a sport you need to do it, then yeah, you've got to do your work.
Yeah.
But there's no, we'll get onto that because the whole identity of being an athlete or something like that, and when stuff changes, it's something that's really interesting to me. But I'd like to go back to where it all started. I don't really know very much about it. So you said just before we hopped on, you're getting used to living down south. Where were you actually born and where did you grow up?
So it's weird because I was actually born in London. So I was born and raised in, I was born in St George's Hospital in Tooting, which is literally a few miles up the road from where I am right now. And then we moved, I grew up in a place called Wandsworth, which is in sort of southwest-ish London. And then we moved out, I was about 6 or 7 years old. I think I was 6 to near enough Guildford down in Surrey. I think the aim of that was for my parents to get us into some slightly better schooling than we had available. I think, the aim was to try and get us into private schools, whether or not that was feasible financially. My sister got into private school. I flopped the exams for mine, so I very happily went into a state school.
No.
But I don't regret that at all. I don't think I was sort of mentally suited for the school that I was being put forward for. So I was actually very glad about that.
Yeah, it's one of them ones that I have no experience of private school, but the people that I talk to, it's apples and pears. It's very much depending on who you're with. I think it can open up more doors because your network is maybe broader, and the people that have got children in private school have already got the money. But there's plenty of people that are living an amazing life with public school, and you wouldn't have the friends that you currently have without it. So yeah, I agree.
That's it. I think for me it was the school that I did end up going to as well. I was quite fortunate that the school that I did go to was still a fantastic school. So it was a state school, but we were scoring really well in I don't even know what Ofsted really did, but we were scoring well in Ofsted and that sort of thing. And like in sport, which is obviously a big thing for me anyway. Like my school was really good at kind of all sorts of different sports. So I had a lot of opportunity there. And plus, I think the big thing for me was from my primary school that I was at the time to that secondary school, it was something like 70% of the students from my year in primary also went to my secondary school, which meant I kept all my friends. Whereas if I'd gone to the private school, I'd have had to have lost, all but maybe 2 of my friends. And I didn't want to do that. I kind of wanted to go where my friends went and keep that network.
That's pretty good. So then obviously school, anything kind of, say, obviously everyone's school life is really impactful for them, but anything that like sticks out, or is it a pretty straightforward experience for you?
I think school was a bit of an interesting one for me. Around the time that I went to secondary school, my family dynamic had started to change. So right from when I was very young, we moved out from London. Like I said, I went to this primary school. I think I joined when I was in like year 1. And it wasn't too long after that my parents then separated. And, it didn't really have a massive effect. I was too young for it to really make an effect. It was almost quite exciting, really, to have 2 separate bedrooms. I had the top bunk at my dad's place, like my mum's. I had another bunk. It was quite cool. I thought.
Even looking back at it now, can you still say that like it didn't affect you? Because obviously, in the moment you think yeah, but now if you look back, like actually, like I started misbehaving more, or I was really like negative to one of my parents because I felt like they were to blame, or was there anything like that?
It was a difficult one. So there was all sorts of things going on through the sort of period where it went from being separated to an eventual divorce. But I think as a kid, you don't really understand relationships. So obviously at that age, I knew that my mum and dad were together, but I'd only been around for like 6 years and only could really understand what words meant for about half of that. So let alone understanding what a relationship is. So I understood that like my mum and dad wouldn't be together. And I remember, finding it a bit weird and not really understanding it. And I think almost to a point that was beneficial, because my sister, who's a bit older than me, I don't think she dealt with it as well as I managed to. Like I said, I thought it was quite cool. Looking back on it now, it probably wasn't cool, and it did have a big impact on me. I think it was a bit of a stressful situation for both parents. Obviously, it's a very unfamiliar situation for them to then have to share the child or the children. So we'd spend one weekend at my dad's place, the next weekend at my mum's. I went to school literally 2 minutes down the road from my mum's when I was at secondary school. So even if I stayed at my dad's, I'd have to go all the way back over to basically my mum's. And then kind of that evolved. So I'd spend most of the school week at my mum's, and then sometimes I'd go and see my dad. But also my dad was in his situation less mentally healthy, I think it's fair to say, than my mum. So it was better for us not to spend as much time at his, because he had things he needed to focus on, kind of to get his life a bit more back on track, and that sort of thing. So it was definitely, looking back, it probably wasn't an ideal sort of scenario, but because I didn't understand it and I didn't want to get too deep into it, I don't think I did. Whereas I think my older sister did have to deal with a lot more of it because she was older, she understood it more. She'd obviously spent more of her life having mum and dad being close, and then not so. So
a
yeah,
lot of it's contextualized, isn't it? Because it depends on what age and what you associate a family to be. Because I'm similar to you. Like my mum and dad split up when I was like 2, but like very shortly after, my stepdad came into the picture. So as far as I've only ever known, my stepdad's been my father figure. Like I'd still go and see my biological dad on like weekends, but like as soon as I started playing football on weekends, that kind of stopped, and it was just like my biological dad. So I've not known anything. And obviously, if you were super young, you hadn't experienced anything other than your own family relationships. You hadn't seen the whole white picket fence, mum and dad lived together forever on television. That was like ingrained. So it's very much like depends on what you're experiencing by so far. So my brother's got a more emotional relationship to my biological father than I necessarily did, but he was only like maybe 4 or 5 at the time. So
right, okay. Interestingly,
similarities.
you know, you mentioned that your stepdad came into the picture. How old were you when your stepdad came into the picture?
It's a funny enough. I think months, maybe less than a year afterwards.
Okay.
The funny story is my stepdad lived across the road from my mum, like in my childhood home. Very weird. He's a widow, and obviously he's got a daughter who's my stepsister. No one associates my stepsister. But I think, I have no memory of him not being around. So like the defining memory is my brother got hurt and went to A&E one day, and the nurse, "Hi, is this your dad?" Blah 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 blah. So at that point we didn't necessarily call him dad, and my brother said, "Oh yes, it is," and it kind of was like a light bulb. And he's like, "Oh shit!" Like my stepdad was like, "Oh yeah, I am the dad." And mum was like, "If you want to, you can call him dad." Like this, that, and the other.
That's really nice.
Yeah,
that's really nice.
He's been great. He's awesome.
Because I think that's one thing that is interesting about the difference. Because I also had in a recent episode I recorded a guy called Jason on, who also used to play American football. He had a similar situation as you and I both, with a divorce early in life, but then in a similar situation to you, his mum sort of found a new partner, and they kind of moved in. He got used to having a stepdad. I didn't have that. So like my parents, to my knowledge, I mean, I wasn't really paying attention, didn't go into new relationships very quickly at all. So I think this is one of the moments in my life that I realized I hadn't really thought about them being apart. Like I knew it happened, like I didn't really deep it, anything like that. But I remember my mum got a new boyfriend. And I remember being like, that's cool. Like, I'm glad she's happy, all of this. But I remember then there was one particular day where we were on holiday. We were actually at this guy's place in Spain, and they were being like particularly close, like just as I would expect a normal couple to be, like as you would. But it's the first time I'd seen my mum be close with someone else, and I remember that hitting me like a train, and I was just like, oh my God, like what? And I realized at that moment that as much as I understood my mum and dad weren't together, that was the first time I understood my mum loved someone else, or was like interested in someone else properly, and I'd never had to think about it. And I think that's a mad credit to my mum and my dad for kind of thinking about my sister and I first when it came to that regard, whether they thought that maybe we hadn't processed it, so they needed to be more careful. And so they took some time to sort of let us see anything like that. But it was definitely a huge moment for me. And I mean, it kind of matured me a lot, because I was always that kid that was like, oh yeah, no, my mum's happy, like she's got this boyfriend. And then from that moment on, it was like, okay, no, my mum and dad are apart. Like my mum's got this boyfriend.
Yeah,
it's serious.
Nothing's happening. They're never getting back together.
Exactly. And I think it wasn't like nail in the coffin is like a really negative way of looking at it, but I think it was like, yeah, it kind of consolidated things, and it kind of closed that chapter for me. And I was still like relatively young, I guess, when you think about it. Like a 12 or 11 or 12-year-old is still a young age to sort of
for sure.
deal with that.
Mate, I think even at our age now, like anything like that is still like a close friend of mine I just found out today. Should be sharing this, but his like family was so close, but his mum and dad have recently separated on terms I don't want to go into. But I was like, wow, like it just hits you. Like I could never imagine that for you. It's a bit sick and it's very dark. This might get cut, but all of my friends, most of my friendship group have lost a parent. Like, and earlier this year I joined the club.
Right.
But it's just been like an inside joke, because unfortunately, there's my girlfriend, one of our friends, Kat, my best mate Jack, my other best friend Gemma, have all lost like a parent, all within like our 20s or something like that. So it was, and other than Kat, it's all been fathers. So the way I actually broke the news to my friend was like, oh mate, I've joined the club. And he was like, what club? And I was like, oh, the Dead Dad Club. So I'm like, how do you kind of bring things up like this to people? It's just so strange. Like, being my best friend, I could talk to him about this. It's a hard one to bring up, and my mate was like present enough to kind of share that with us today, and I was taken aback. It's like one of them ones where, do you ask questions about it? Do you just let it be? And it's such a hard topic. Like even at our age, to go through seeing your parents kind of, because then you can go back and question everything. It's like, they stayed together for this long for us, or this and the other. And it's really hard. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this.
Yeah,
I'm sure he doesn't mind.
It's always a difficult topic, and I generally find with sensitive topics like that, and obviously very sorry to you and all of your friends for the losses you've had so far. And I think we're kind of at this age now where being in your mid to late 20s is the first time you start to experience like grief that can be close. I mean, I've lost family members when I was very young, and again, probably too young to understand it. But as you get older, you start to lose family members. You sometimes you lose friends, and when you're in your first sort of 10 years of life, it's pretty unnatural to lose someone because of
you
time
just don't, like
scales.
morality isn't something that is aware, or like just you become so much more aware of it as life goes on. Like even like when you're a kid, you use a grandparent. Oh yeah, it's sad, but then you think about later in life, and you're like, oh crap, like these big occasions, they're not here now. Like weddings, Christmases, you're like, oh, and it's mental how it kind of just springs upon you as you mature.
I think this is one of the reasons I kind of started doing this podcast a year ago, is when I sort of started looking at what my mental state was on a daily basis and how sport and exercise impacted my thought process on a daily basis, even on an hourly basis. I then would start to look back, and we've obviously spoken about my parents splitting. There was some impacts on my sister in terms of mental health as well, which then had another huge impact on the family. And for me, I was just kind of this boat, I guess, floating along. Like I just carried on floating along, didn't really let much impact me. But the only reason for that was because sport was there for me. Like sport drowned everything out for me. Like I think back, there's this one specifically clear image. At my mum's, I used to have this plastic football goal, and I used to have this Nike 90 yellow and purple Premier League ball.
Oh yeah, I remember them ones.
Yeah. Possibly the best designed football ever. I used to stay outdoors probably 3 hours every day after school, come rain or shine. And I would try and hit that ball in the top two corners of this little plastic goal in a row before I could go back inside. And like I did that, and I would be aware probably in the house at the time, my sister and my mum might be arguing, but like I wouldn't like I was used to that. I just didn't want to be a part of it. So I would spend all that time outside, and then I'd do all the school clubs I could. My mum really wanted me to get into them to kind of give me structure to life. Sort of, I'd have training on this one night, training on this night. I'd be doing cross country for school then. I'd be playing rugby for them then. Like it was kind of this structure, and it kind of just drowned out all the noise. And it definitely wasn't at a point where I thought I was ever going to be like a professional. Like all of my friends wanted to be a professional footballer, professional rugby player. I think in a weird way, I always knew that wasn't for me. Like I didn't think I wanted to be a professional, let alone, you know, even if I had the athletic ability. And if we're being honest now, I mean, I can confirm I didn't have the athletic ability, but
just the
it
wrong
wasn't
sport, mate. You just need to find the one.
exactly. I need to find the right sport earlier, but at the same time, I think sport for me was just a thing I enjoyed doing that was a great distraction from the noise that was going on at home. And so that's why I sort of look back on it and I realized I'm definitely not the only person. And even like I said, day to day now, it has the same impact. Like if I can't train, then you know everything else falls out of whack for me because that's how I set my routine effectively. Like my day starts with my training and sometimes my day also ends with training. So like whatever happens in between is just a good bit of the sandwich, really.
Yeah, it's a great way. I just want to go back and say, obviously, you said you were outside, and the instant thing you said that my mum and sister were inside arguing. Did it cause a lot of disputes between your mum and your sister? And was she of that age? And also, were you discreetly aware that you were avoiding being in those arguments by being outside? Or was it a
Yeah.
case of, I don't care, I don't want to get involved, I'm just going to be here, have fun? What was it?
So the arguments were always silly. So like I said, and I appreciate anyone listening to this, don't go hunting after my sister, but my sister suffered with an eating disorder, which was a knock-on result of all the mental stress she felt being the older sibling with separated parents. There was a lot of drama that I didn't feel or understand, like I said, but my sister would pick up on, and I don't think she felt very lonely through that period. So anyway, she was suffering with this, and my parents really didn't understand it. And obviously, they had their own stress of being split parents, organizing both of our lives, and trying to raise us without really having an impact. The sort of separation having an impact, and ultimately, this comes along and it throws the biggest spanner in the works because they don't really understand it. They don't know how to manage that as parents. No one else in the family, to my knowledge, has ever had anything like that. And so there wasn't really no advice. And I think I don't want them, if they ever sort of hear me say this, I don't want them to take this the wrong way, but in the preliminary stages of it, they definitely didn't deal with it correctly. And I think they would look back
I
on
don't
it
think
now
that
and be
anyone
like,
had known what to do with it then, like, because they'd have probably just
exactly.
taken to a doctor and be like, you need to start eating, but obviously there's probably like so much trauma that built up
That's it.
into it as a response.
That's it. And I think that's the difficulty is you kind of go into panic mode. Like you think, oh, it's an easy thing to tackle. Like we'll sweep that under the rug. It's just a phase. Well, I mean, it's not. And I think one of the things that was very difficult was I could see how frustrated my parents would get because they couldn't handle the situation, but that frustration would come out in arguing. And from my sister, she was frustrated because she wasn't being allowed to do what she wanted to do in that sort of mental state. And she felt too controlled and she couldn't see her friends because she wasn't trusted for various reasons. And basically, it was all of this noise. And at an early age, I could just appreciate that none of it really meant anything. Like it was just frustration. And so I was aware that all of this arguing was going on. I was aware that it would never go anywhere physical or anything really that damaging. Nothing like that was being said. It was literally just noise. And so for me,
just
it was
frustrations, isn't it?
Yeah,
like,
it was like
everyone wanted to say what they need to say, but no one actually communicated.
Yeah, and like from what had been said in the argument, you'd probably they'd maybe get on each other's nerves a bit, say something they probably shouldn't have said, and by the next day they'd be over it and arguing about something else maybe. And like it wasn't a daily occurrence, but it happened relatively frequently. And it was kind of to the point where it was like, look, I know this happens, and I'm just going to remove myself from it because there's no point. Like I'm not going to get involved. Like there's nothing that they're talking about that is worth me getting involved. But second of all, like it's just wasted energy for me, and that's also something that I carry forward now is I don't argue with people. Like nothing good will come of that. If we can't have a diplomatic adult conversation, then let's pause it, because I don't want to put the energy into an argument. I would rather walk away, think about it, and we both come back and have an adult conversation, so we can just get it done in like 5 minutes. That's kind of the way I operate, and that is probably as a result of that, of me kind of recognizing early on that I did not want to be anything to do with arguing. And if someone's got a particular opinion, let them have it, or give them time to maybe consider another opinion, and then we can discuss. That's kind of come from there, I think.
I'm the exact opposite. I'll argue till the sun comes. Do you know what the worst thing is? I'll just bicker with my dad, and he'll just say, "You're right." And I'm like, "I know, but like, I need to prove to you that I'm right." And it's the worst thing. But I've recently found out that it's just because I need to get dopamine, and everything part of my personality is probably ADHD. But go back to that. Obviously, you're removing yourself from that situation, but I'm not trying to get too deep into and look for angles. But like, did you feel that kind of, where was it in terms of like jealousy and parental attention? Because that's still a lot of interaction that she's getting, where you're outside training like David Beckham, you can't go until you've hit the crossbar 3 times. So mate, you had the right, you trained like an athlete at the young age.
Yeah, but it was actually,
where did that feel in terms of your relationship with your parents? And like,
it's interesting, because I think you picked up on something there which seems relatively logical, in terms of, I feel like a lot of people would maybe start to get jealous of the attention that she was receiving. In all honesty, the opposite happened. So essentially, I went away and I played a lot of sport. And as a young kid, when you play a lot of sports, you tend to improve at all sports, because you're doing all these different sports and you get better generally. So then I started to win things. So I won that, like I've mentioned it to you before, but I won
shout it. Don't be humble.
I won a Surrey Sports Award when I was in primary school, and I have no idea what it was for. I don't know who nominated me. I don't know what happened, but I won this Surrey Sports Award. I got a nice silver trophy cup. And I remember getting it, and I was so happy. I was so unbelievably happy. My mum was so proud. My sister, you know, she was like, "Oh, well done. That's really cool." Dad was happy as well. And then I, like, from there, really, like, I had a bit more confidence in sport. I was doing well. And then I just started feeling really guilty about it, because I was doing really well. And for a period of time, my sister wasn't. And so all of a sudden, I was getting all of the positive attention, and my sister was getting a lot of negative attention. And while someone might be getting more attention, quality, not quantity in my book, if I'm getting all positive attention and no negative, I'm winning. So that's what was going on. And then it started to be, my sister started to do a bit more athletics when she was in her secondary school. And she was actually quite quick. She was a sprinter. I definitely wasn't. And she started to do pretty well at school in that. And she was getting a lot of praise and a lot of credit. And on the same day, she came first or second in like a 100-meter sprint or something in her year. I remember her getting in the car and saying that. And I remember I had done something really awesome in sport at school that day, that arguably I could have sat there and gone, yeah, well, I did this. But I didn't, and I held back and I didn't say it. And I waited till that night when my mum or dad was putting me to bed. I can't remember who it was. And then I told them, and they were like, "Oh, that's amazing." And I'd done the whole thing because I wanted my sister to get the positive, like, credit and the positive attention for it. And it was basically like I had to, like, I wasn't like a natural born athlete that was ready to take on GB stuff. But I remember just being like, I don't want all this just positive attention. Like, my sister needs some as well, and she's not getting a lot. So, like, give her some. So I definitely wasn't
jealous. What age was this?
I was almost guilty. Again, I reckon I must have been around 11 to 13.
That's a lot of self-awareness, like being aware of, and the foresight of thinking, okay, like, my sister needs this kind of, this boost in confidence. Like, you've got an old soul on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think there is something to do with that. And I don't know if it's just from, you know, having a lot go on when I was younger and having a lot of personal time, like, as well. Like, I do, and I don't want to have an iPad kid when I eventually have kids. I think that's not my preferred parenting choice. I understand why people do it. But I was left alone a lot, and I was left to be bored, and I was left to sort of sit with my feelings and get to know myself. And I don't think
scary.
It is scary, but like, as a kid, like, it's not that scary. It's just kind of, you get used to it. And I definitely wasn't left alone. I wasn't ignored. I don't want my parents to ever feel like
Oh
that was the
yeah.
case. But I definitely got to understand what I liked, what I didn't like, and kind of get to know myself, which I think long term has stood me in good stead. For those sort of reasons, I'm relatively self-aware, and I like to make sure that I'm kind of trying to. I've got my spot in society. I kind of know where I'm going with it, and not to fuck anyone else up along the way. That kind of thing.
Do you think there's a downside of being self-aware? Because like I feel like sometimes I'm so self-aware of I know exactly what's going wrong. I know exactly how to fix it all of the time. But then also I'm completely unself-aware at times where like I'll forget that I haven't eaten all day, or I haven't been to the toilet, or what I was saying was probably really insulting to someone, and I'm just being inquisitive or something like that. But where do you find it? Because I think it can be hard when you're so self-aware and you're aware of everything you're doing, especially when it can be self-destructive and sabotaging.
I think, yeah, there's definitely a balance. So there's been times in the past where, again, this is probably like as now puberty's hitting. And I generally, I think I went through puberty quite late, which is a bit of a difficult thing in itself. Like all of your friends have gone through things. You're seeing that happen. You feel a bit left behind. And being a bit self-aware, like I was like, why is this happening? Like why is it not happening really? But then
What do you
ultimately,
define as puberty kind of thing? Like, was it just like a
the
growth
sort of
spurt and facial hair, or
well, physical changes, yes, but then some of the emotional changes as well. Like I remember, people are starting to get into relationships, house parties are happening, and like there's physical changes that are making boys turn into men and make them more attractive, and they're not happening to me. And all
yeah,
of this is going on, and I still have a crush on people at the time, and like I'm just not able to really do anything about that. Like I'm just
yeah,
that nice guy in the corner. But the problem is I'm self-aware. I know it all isn't happening. And the thing is with self-awareness, if you go too far past the line, then you start overthinking, and overthinking is so damaging. And again, in like a reflective sense, um overthinking has been a massive thing I've done for so long, and I only clocked onto it about 2 years ago. There are certain situations where I think the way that I overthink massively benefits me. When I'm driving, for example, the amount
yeah,
of brain power that goes in means that I'm fortunate to this day, touch wood, to have not had a car accident. And there's some scenarios where I've been like, how did I know that was going to happen? Like,
yeah,
but it's because I'm thinking of every eventuality. But then
hyper aware.
it makes driving really, really tiring because of that. Whereas then in other situations, in terms of like studying or even just living daily life, like there's so many scenarios I used to think about that were just pointless. And then it started to knock into sport as well. I think one of my biggest hindrances when I was, sort of, I did hit puberty. I was growing. I was now athletically more able. I was stronger. I could hang with some of the bigger guys because I caught up. Um, I just overthought everything. Like my brain would have to do something before my body did it, and I
Yeah,
wasn't reacting like an athlete. And that delay is often the difference between someone being absolutely top tier because there's no thought process. There's no think. They just do. But for
mm,
me, it was very much I need to think. I will think again and see if that was the right option, and then I will do. And I took that approach in everything in my life. And I think for a period of time, it really did start to hold me back.
yeah,
And so that there is definitely that line between being too self-aware and overthinking, and then yeah, not being self-aware enough where you make mistakes that hold you back. There's definitely a line.
yeah. I completely agree. I definitely agree. So, shall we jump to uni then, and then we can kick into the American. So you must have done pretty well, unless there's something that juicy we're going to miss in like sixth form times.
So yeah, something pretty dramatic did happen in sixth form, to be fair. I really figured out who I was in sixth form. And there's a part to this story that's pretty cringe. But
Okay, let me hear it. I'm listening. I'm listening.
so my chosen A levels were physics, maths, product design, and chemistry, and I wanted to do engineering at uni. Again, like in hindsight, engineering was probably the most interesting subject. I don't think it's what I wanted to do necessarily. It was just like if I'm gonna do something, it's gonna be that. So I picked
Was it
those.
one of them ones where someone said that you'd earn a lot of money doing it, like I was with chemistry?
Sort of, yeah. I was aware if I got an engineering degree, I could always fall back on that. And to an extent, I'll be honest, like it is true. Like now that I've got an engineering degree, I can go into a lot of different jobs with that degree, and that is a nice, comforting situation to have. But again, if that sort of like door wasn't there, would I have chosen engineering? I don't know. Would I have gone to uni? I don't know, because a lot happened, and effectively, I took those four A-level choices, and at the time, so for anyone that's going through A-levels now, you've obviously got your own way of doing it. You do all your exams at the end. You get numbers or something now. I don't understand it, but
That's tough, man.
It's yeah, horrible, and I wouldn't have done well with that because I did my 4 AS levels. And in my 4 AS levels, I got B, C, D, D as grades. And I wanted to go to universities that needed like A, B, or A star, A, B. And so like I was not cutting it. And the problem was that I got a B in one of the ones I wanted to carry on for A2. So you drop one. Most of the time people drop one of the four. So I was going to drop chemistry. Now I got the C in chemistry, which meant that I got B, D, D in the ones I wanted to carry on with. So I massively blew it. And at this point, I already knew I wanted to take a gap year anyway. So it wasn't the end of the world. Like I was going to be forced to now. I got one offer from a university I didn't want to go to, and all of the other universities like rejected me. So what I did was I sat there for a while. My mum being incredibly supportive. I'd also had some issues with exams in the past. I'd got past with GCSEs, but I did okay at GCSE, so I didn't really flag it as an issue. But confidence-wise with exams, I seemed to really struggle. And I didn't really understand how to study. Anyway, I basically get to this point. I've fucked up, I've failed, and I'm left here. And my mum's like, we're going to get you a tutor. We're going to sign you up for the extra lessons at school. And you can come back a year and you can redo your AS levels, or you can pick a handful of the ones that you want to retake and try and retake them at the same time as your A2s. And that's what you'll do. I went away, and I don't know how this happened, and this is where the story starts to get a bit cringe. I discovered a video on YouTube that was like a motivational speech, and there was something about it that really, really fucking resonated, and it was like a switch flipped in my head, and I walked into school, and I retook everything from AS, and I decided to retake everything from AS and do my A2s at the same time. So like
that's tough.
I'm taking everything that I've done, throwing it in the trash, lighting it on fire, and I'm starting again. But I'm doing it all in 1 year. I'm now going to do 2 years. Obviously, you've got the benefit of everything you do in A2 builds on AS. So everything I was doing for A2 is still kind of revision for AS. So that's fine. But I remember going to my teachers for asking for my predicted grades to redo my UCAS forms. And I went to them and I was like, hey, I'm retaking everything. I'm really confident. I know I'm going to do well. Can you give me this predicted grade, this predicted grade, this predicted grade? And they all went no, like they weren't having it. And they pulled up these spreadsheets to show me how generally everybody drops down 1 grade when they go from AS to A2. And so they absolutely could not give me the grade that I wanted for my predicted. They gave me B, D, D as predicted grades. So you can imagine then, yes, my UCAS forms, I got rejected. No one would take me. Again, still had that one offer from Brunel, but I didn't really want to do the course that I was offered. So I then got to January. I did my mock exams for my A2s, and I got like an E and a U and a U in them. And again, all of the teachers are like, this is what we told you was going to happen. And it was fine, because at this point I had my plan. And the plan was, most people for their June exams start revising mid to late April, maybe. So they get a solid month in, and that sort of time, that's quite a lot of time revising. That's like 6 weeks before the exams start. I decided that the week of my mock exams, I would see what I could achieve without revision and see where the holes were. And then from that week in January, I would revise until my exams in summer, every day. So from that week, using a lot of motivational content off YouTube, I got up every day at 5:30 and I would be revising for 2.5 hours before school. I'd get to school, all of my lunches, apart from maybe one a week, I would go into the library and I would spend that time revising. I'd get home, I'd do any homework I had to do, and then I would revise until 10 o'clock, and then I could have half an hour in front of the TV and I'd go to bed. And I worked like a machine. And I basically...
It's crazy.
I cut out...
This is David Goggins shit at the age of what? 17, 18?
Well, it kind of was. And it was basically David Goggins in my ear. But like I cut out my social group because it was like, if I don't do this, I don't know what I do after uni. And it was almost fear that was driving it. So I ended up redoing all the exams. I came out with A star, A, B total.
That's amazing. Like the dedication that's taken. Like I struggle now.
I was genuinely, I was quite gutted with the B because it was 2 marks off an A to have A star AA. But then as a result of that, I got my uni choices and that was great. But the thing that was huge for me was it wasn't the goal, it was the person that I become in the process. Like I had just proved that actually, do you know what? If you want something, it is that simple. Like just fucking do it. Like cut all the noise out, cut all the bullshit out, and do it for a temporary amount of time and see what happens. And I proved to myself, you can make stuff happen. And that's really where this flip switched. So when I went to uni, so I did do my ski season gap year, basically almost didn't go to uni because I fell in love with skiing and just wanted to be a bum for the rest of my life. But then, yeah, getting to uni, I knew I had achieved this. The scary thing was I was aware of how much dedication and effort it took. And I never really was sure if I wanted to do it. I knew I physically could achieve what I wanted to, but it was like, do I really want to do that again? Like it was so much effort. Like this is uni. I'm supposed to have fun here. Like I live by myself. I live by my own rules. And I was doing engineering, which was a hard course. And then decided to play American football, which was new to me at the time, and basically added a whole other module, as I'm sure you found as well.
Yeah. Well, mine's similar. But I'm sure I'll share that with you another day. We don't need to be talking about me on this. But did you see first year as a similar kind of challenge as doing your ASs and A2s in 1 year with only 6 months left to pass it? So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So first year I wasted a year of my life. First year I came back from doing my ski season and I was like, I don't even know if I want to be here. But it's engineering. I want to hit the ground running. I want to be really good at this. And I was aware that I hadn't come off from doing like additional maths at AS level or A2 level. So I was coming in as a bit of like, I had less education to do what everyone else was doing. And so I tried to hit the ground running and I just lied to myself massively about the work that I was putting in. So I understood the amount of time I needed to be doing. Now, I wasn't getting up that early before like lectures or anything. I was going to all my lectures. If I'm honest, I was playing Madden on my phone for most of them. Then I was still going out as much as most people were, but then I would sometimes just not let myself go out on like Friday night because I'd be like, I need to do some more work. I'm falling behind. I need to get my tutorial questions done, whatever it was. And then I would just sit and I would barely do anything on those nights. And I would lie to myself and pretend that, I did what was best for me. I didn't go out on Friday night and I stayed in and studied. No, I didn't. What I did was I stayed in on Friday night like a loner. I put on a series on Netflix and I worked while that was on. And I maybe got 2 questions done in 4 hours. And I just wasn't efficient. And then as a result of that, guess what? When it came to exams again, I barely passed. And all of my friends that were going out and having a great time were smashing it. And I just wasn't. And they were looking at me like, what's going on? Like this maths wise, it doesn't add up. You're putting in more time than us and you're doing worse. And I was like, what's happening? And so first year was, like I said, I wasted my life. I threw a lot of social life opportunities away. And I didn't do well in my course either. So that was a bit of a waste. But the only real positive thing was that I had started playing American football and I'd kind of got into that. And then that enabled me in my second year. I'd had this realization of like, I need to take stuff less seriously at uni right now. Like I know 3rd and 4th year for my engineering degree are going to absolutely suck. So let's enjoy this a little bit. And I basically treated like the first semester of my second year like it was my first year freshers, basically.
Yeah.
And so I fell behind on work. But what I really worked out in that time again was how I work most efficiently. If I'm honest, and again, if you're at university, this isn't necessarily the best advice if you're listening. I just stopped going to lectures for the most part because all of my lectures, and this is pre-COVID, all of my lectures were actually being posted online anyway. And I could go to the library for 3 hours a day, put the lecture on 2 times speed because all of my lecturers would send me to sleep with how slow they spoke. So if I sped it up to 2 times, I could have a whole lecture done in 30 minutes. So then if I had 6 lectures on one day, I could easily do that in 3 hours. I could then go to the library 9 a.m. 3 hours later, I've done all of yesterday's lectures. It's 12 o'clock midday and I'm done. I can have the rest of the day to myself. I had more free time. I had more work-life balance effectively. So I started
even though
doing
you
that.
were going out, you were still getting up at 9 o'clock.
So still didn't go out that often. So I would go out on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, a Friday night, and then I wouldn't go out on a Saturday night because we had games or training on a Sunday morning. So on the nights where I went out, yeah, I probably wouldn't, but I could go to the library at 12 and still be out by 3 p.m. And like, again, that's not gospel. I wasn't doing Goggins stuff at that time. Like I was doing it when I needed to do it. I still wasn't smashing it, but I was doing better this year than I was the previous year when I had been trying as hard as I could, in massive quotation marks. And then, yeah, I get, like, even with training and stuff like that, finding a balance in the gym. Like I was just sort of going to the gym. I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't training for my sport either. It was kind of this like refiguring out who I was as a uni student. Like I knew who I could be, but like I didn't really want to do that. I was at uni, I was supposed to have fun. So I was still kind of figuring all of that out at that point. But yeah, American football at that time was also another load. So, watching film, studying film, also being quarterback at the time and starting was a massive responsibility. I need to know what everyone's doing on the field, not just what my job is. And I'm having to watch as much film as possible. And this is where that overthinking thing comes back in again. So like I would watch, probably when I got into it and I kind of understood how to watch film, I'd probably watch 20 hours of film a week before a game. And
How many?
15 to 20 hours of film a week before a game.
I don't think I've ever watched 15 or 20 hours of film total.
No, and genuinely, that's a good thing. Trust me, it's a good thing. And I would go into a game pretty much aware of what this team is going to do. And the problem is that was just wrong. Like I had no idea, but I thought I did. So I would line up and the ball would be in front of me and I'd be like, oh, I know when that guy moves there, I know what they're doing. This is amazing. I'd snap the ball and it wouldn't happen. And all hell would break loose in my mind. I'd be like, oh, fuck, like that hasn't happened. Like, where am I supposed to go with the ball? I'd throw to someone I shouldn't and I'd turn the ball over. And like, it's purely out of a state of panic that I thought something was going to happen. I was super confident in it. And then when he didn't, I didn't know how to react because like I hadn't planned for this.
You'd over-prepared and
over-prepared. Exactly that. And as a result of that, I was so football smart, but I wasn't pitch smart. Like this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand is you need to understand what's going on when you're on the field and you need to understand what's going on when you're not on the field. And you can be great off the field. You can really understand football. And generally, most of the time, these guys make great referees or great coaches. But when you get on the field, it takes a totally different brain to be field smart. Yeah. Field smart is someone that might know and is happy not knowing what's going to happen.
But you've really validated me right there.
There you go.
I feel like I have no idea what's going on half the time. But when I'm on the field, I'm like, okay, there's the man, tackle him. But like you said, there's a big difference between good coaches and good players. And just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're a good coach. Like Nelson is both because he has an extensive knowledge of the game, and is a great player. Maybe because of his great knowledge, but also even when he's not being the general moving pieces around as he does, she's quite happy to take a step back and let someone else. He'll still be making plays.
Yeah,
exactly. Whereas I'm not that cerebral general.
I think that's something that I massively struggled with as well. So when I was being coached, I never had a coach actually. So I moved into this position, and the year that I moved in and became the starting quarterback of the team, there was no longer a quarterback coach. And that went on for pretty much my entire time that I was at Loughborough. Now, there was a guy that came in, a guy called Joe Walker, who's now the head coach of Leeds Beckett University. He's actually a fantastic offensive coordinator. And I hope you won't mind me saying this. His coaching style for quarterbacks didn't resonate with me. And that happens. That's the same with people when they go and get therapists. Like you have to resonate with someone to get along with them and get the best out of them.
Yeah. And especially coaches.
Exactly. And it just didn't fit my style. For me to learn something, I need to know exactly why. And if I can't be told biomechanically, like my body will only be able to achieve this from this position. if I'm just told because that's what it is and it works for me, great. I don't believe you. Like, I'm not gonna be able to apply that to my game. And so I really struggled. So I ended up getting some coaching from this American guy, Quincy Avery, who at the time was Deshaun Watson's private coach. Fantastic opportunity when he came over to the UK, and it blew my mind how he was coaching. And the way that he coached was he would get on a personal level with everybody, and he would understand about your life so that he could resonate with you. I feel like a lot of coaches don't invest enough time understanding the human, not the player. Because if you understand the human, you know how to get the best out of them. And you can, and this is not in a psychopathic way, you can adjust your coaching and the way you behave around people based on how they kind of operate.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's what a good coach does. A good coach puts the game aside and focuses on interpersonal relationship to understand how to get the right communication out.
In reality, it sounds bad, but you need to know how to manipulate the players, because you need to know how to fire them up and motivate them. And part of motivation is somewhat fear of it going wrong. So you need to kind of present that if we're not going to do what we need to do, this is what's going to happen. You need to know that. And it's the same, different structure, different folks. That's one of the problems with Uniball. You've got 6 weeks to teach people that have never played American football before to play it, and this, that, and the other. And there's not a lot of resource out there in England for it. So people are definitely just making it up as they go along.
Yeah, so and I think one of the big issues in UK football, and I don't want to like at everyone here. I'm not massively in the community anymore, so if people come hunting,
it's fine. There's 5 listeners. We'll be fine.
No, this will pop, and you can make a short of this. Generally, my message to the brickball community is that it's a fantastically fast-growing sport, but for the love of God, stop pretending it's the NFL, because there are coaches that are relatively new to coaching that will treat rookie players like dirt, when in reality there is maybe less than 12 months of experience between the two of them. And I think ultimately the relationship you have with a coach massively decides how you end up playing the game long term. And if you as a coach want to become the most serious person you can because you think that's going to get the best out of your players in this country where it's an amateur level, then you have to understand these people are paying to be around you. And if you're going to treat them like dirt, and if there's not going to be that team relation, sort of good team bonding where everyone's there to be with each other and they pay money to be with each other, then it's not a good environment to be in, and winning won't happen. And even if you do win, and I've been in teams where there's been so much focus and there's not been a lot of fun and we've won, that isn't winning. Like that isn't fun. I would go home from some games, and with Tamworth, we might have smacked a team 50 plus points to nothing. I would go home and I would genuinely just be like, okay, the job was done. Like, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. And that's really sad, because
do you think that's down to the coaching or
not necessarily?
Because you're a very self-aware person, so you will pick holes in every single mistake you make, and you had the hardest job on the field.
That's the problem. I think and this is still when I was watching way too much film. So I was watching way too much film. My expectation is I know what this team's going to do. I know what I'm going to do. I know what my team needs to do. The coaching was serious. We had some incredible players that were used to winning. So, for a while, until we lost to Manchester that first time, I think the Knicks had gone, I can't remember. It was like 34 or something games unbeaten, right, in the regular season. Like, at what point when you're that used to winning, like, winning isn't really winning anymore. And again, that fear of losing starts to creep in. And when it happened against Manchester that year, it might have been one of the best things to ever happen to the team. And we ended up going on to the final, and yes, we lost to the Warriors, but we wouldn't have got to that final anywhere really close. I think the team might have disbanded because we were all getting on each other's toes and like pissing each other off at that time, because everyone just wasn't enjoying the game anymore. Like, it was just like, we paid
What year
money.
Was this? I assume you're talking pre-2019.
It was the 2019 year, so it was the last year before COVID. And there was, it was just a bit of a weird place. And I think that was really when I started to think, I'm not really enjoying this sport anymore. Like, this has become a job, but I'm paying to do it.
But is that because you were treating it like the NFL?
I was, yeah. And I was around people that also were. And then there was a few people that I started to notice that we're actually going from playing in top level teams and dropping down a couple of divisions just to have fun. And I couldn't comprehend why you would do that, why you would accept this level of, you know, having a couple of pints before you turn up to training. Like, that would frustrate me if any of my teammates did that. And then I was like, why should it? Like, if we're paying 300 some teams to £300 to play every year, you should be able to go and turn up on whatever crack you want to do. Like, like, ideally not, because it's not going to benefit the team's performance, but at the same time, like, you shouldn't, it shouldn't be a job. You should be able to have fun and feel free within doing it. And so
it's one of those ones, if the team culture's like that, people shouldn't be demonized for going to have fun rather than to win. Like, if you're in a serious team and you're not taking it serious and you're detrimenting the team, then no, you should be having the pints. But if you want to move away from a team that takes it super serious, then yeah, that's fine. But obviously it's the ego, people wanting to keep hold of talent, and everyone wants people to see their hobby the way they see it. It's just one of those ones, isn't it?
I think one of the nice things to have seen is, with Manchester now kind of moving forward, the Warriors were always known as a super serious team. Like, they'd go dark on their socials once a year. I would genuinely like to ask, because they were successful during that period, if all of those players, you know, if they feel that was worth it, you know, was going dark off socials and kind of staying off and not being a sociable person for a month, was it worth it? And a lot of them would probably say yes, because they won. Now, I want to know, in the years where they didn't win, do you regret kind of shutting yourself off from life for a month at a time? And then with Manchester now, you can see Manchester have developed massively. They've become 2-time winning. Obviously, they've got plans to go on and continue winning, whether that's Europe or still in the UK. And there's a load of the guys at GB. Again, I'm sure for the first time they won, and for the second time they most recently won, it was amazing. It would have been the most fun time. You know, they've started winning all of this. They are now approaching the time where it's become an expectation that they win every game. Really,
well, it's one of those you're no longer the underdog. It's like
exactly.
It's like the whole like Chiefs this season, like.
And how do you make that fun anymore? Like, you're expected to win, and so you know you have to train now, because if you don't train and then you lose, then that's terrible. Like, you shouldn't lose a game anymore. And so all of a sudden, for some of these players that have done a fantastic job to get to this position, they may be in a similar spot to I was, where it was like, what do I do to keep this fun? Like, I'm aware that I love winning. It was great getting here, but how do I keep that? And for me, I think, again, self-awareness, I started to sort of see the direction that the team I was in was going. There was all sorts of changes going on in coaching and energy changes, and players were retiring and everything like that. And I was starting to take major sort of impact on my body, like physical impact. And I started to realize that I was paying for some of the injuries. I was physically and quite literally paying to get injured. And I started to think about the amount of time that I was putting into it. And I started to stop putting so much time into the film. I started having a lot more fun on the field. I started enjoying it a lot more as a result of that. And it was great. But then also through that season, I had a few negative relationships form. And they weren't like deep negative relationships, but it really became like this whole idea of driving to training for an hour each way, because I was driving from Derby to Tamworth. And I was doing that twice a week. And then for games, I might be driving up to Liverpool or something like that, paying in petrol. And it was just like, for me, and this is why I've kind of moved on to doing what I'm doing now, imagine if I took that same energy and I did something that directly impacted me, like only me. Like, what could I possibly achieve? Because I did that when I was in sixth form, when I was really young. And I saw an immediate impact. Now I'm putting the same energy into something that I don't have complete control over. So even if I do put all my energy into that, it may come to nothing. And for me, it was like, okay, let's explore an avenue, which I'm still passionate about, where I can put everything on the table and like have a crack at it and see what happens. And the self-reward, even though like this podcast it's not huge, it's
a variable that you're in complete control of. Like, if you win as a team, you win as a team, but you can also play awfully and win as a team. It's one of those selfish things. It's similar to like being self-employed. Like, there's amazing security with being in employment. You know that if you're having a bad week, you can take it a bit slow, and there's going to be someone to cheer you on when you do something good. But with being self-employed, you know that it's a double-edged sword, because you're the only one that can do it, and you're the one that has to do it. But then when something does go wrong, you're the only one that you can help.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, like you've done it, and that's obviously what you're doing now.
Yeah, and I think the message really is it's very, very easy in life because we have friendships, we have relationships, we're doing so many things with other people. When we go to work, you know, for that period of time, if you are working a 9 to 5, if you're going to the office for that sort of job, you're focused on that 9 to 5. Yeah, sometimes you go on your phone, you get a break, whatever, but your time isn't with yourself. And ultimately, one of the biggest things that people are now realizing, especially when it comes to mental health and that sort of thing, is that at the end of the day, you're the person you go to bed with every night. And you're the person who's going to be your biggest critic. So if you don't know who you are and you're not focusing on something that benefits you directly in your life, and for some people that might be playing sport in their team, like they need to focus on that because that brings them the most joy. That's fantastic. And I think for me, I discovered that wasn't it. And that sounds horrible because I love all my teammates. I love all the people I used to play with. I don't regret spending any of that time doing that and spending that time with them. But when I went to bed at night, I would still think, like, is this really it? Like, is this bringing me everything? Is this the maximum level of joy and accomplishment I will ever achieve? And I think I started to realize that for me personally, it wasn't. And so I needed to spend some time figuring out what that would be for me. And so I'm basically just, again, took what I had and threw it in the trash can, lit it on fire and just walked away from it and tried to pick up pieces and start again with something fresh, which is what I'm doing now. But the approach with what I'm doing now, because I've tried to start other things in the past, is if I just don't stop doing what I'm doing, then like how can it not work out? You know, and like
you're just doing it. Like it's one of them things. Like you can't fail unless you set some extravagant goal. If your goal is to I'm gonna have a conversation with someone next week, you can get that done. And it's all about the yardstick that you measure yourself by, and that's why they say the journey, because you've got to complete a lot of goals in that journey.
I think for me, the huge thing, and this is again some wisdom that came from playing games and that sort of thing, is you always talk about going 1-0 this week if you're playing an American football game. You want to win this week. You don't want to focus on the end goal too much because then you kind of lose track of everything, and you can slip in your performance because you feel like you don't care about what's in between you and that big goal. Well, ultimately, you need to set a process that's going to take that you know will eventually maybe get you to that goal, but you don't want to focus too much on how you're going to get there, because that's when all of these barriers come into the way. Like if I asked you, you know, to drive from where you currently live, I want you to take a look at Google Maps, look at all the instructions on that list variation and get to mine. Then you're looking at all of the things you need to remember to do in order to get to mine, right? Whereas if you just switch that off and you look at the picture that only shows you 100 yards at a time of straight road, you'll end up getting to mine. Whereas the other way, you'll look at it and before you even leave, you'll be like, where the fuck do I go? Like there's so much stuff for me to do. Ultimately, to build anything successful in life, there's going to be a lot of things that you need to do, but you don't need to have the answers to those before you start. Because if you try and have the answers to all of them, you've just wasted God knows how many years trying to have the answers. And then unfortunately, the way that humans evolve and humans work, someone's already done it.
Yeah.
And so for me, this time it was, I'm going to set a process, and I have this plan written out in a notebook that I live to day of like, when I reach out to people to try and get them on, how many people I need to plan a week, editing, what I'm editing, what day, for how long, to make sure that not only am I getting everything done, but I'm also not being an unpresent boyfriend with my girlfriend, or I'm not missing out on family events, that kind of thing. It allows me to have this structure. And ultimately, I've fallen in love with the weekly process that I have. And what that brings is great. And am I happy at the end of each week if I post an episode? I mean, you mentioned about 10 minutes ago, this is only going to get 5 viewers, okay? But the fact that you're doing it, whether you think it's only going to get 5 viewers or it pops off and gets 1 million, that's what's fundamentally important. At the end of each week, I'm happy because I've achieved the process that I've set out and I've enjoyed it. And if that then turns into a success for whatever other people deem successful, that's great. But my form of success is finishing those tasks this week and then enjoying the outcome. And focusing on that means that all of the little things that you figure out along the way aren't that detrimental. So I mean, one of the big things for me that people can notice if they go back and look at my earlier podcasts, I'm holding the microphone, and it was a massive ball ache to edit because sometimes when people bang the mics, even myself, or there's noises like coughing and stuff like that, I had to go through and spend hours and hours and hours editing it. And the thing that I needed to do was buy a microphone stand. Like, it's that simple.
Yeah.
But if I had sat down and thought about it, yes, that would have been a smart thing to invest in the first place. But if I'd started thinking about that, I'd have started to think about foam insulation for sound, all of these other things, which I don't need. And
You're asking questions that you don't need the answers to yet.
Exactly. And like just starting and then seeing the immediate impact of those microphone stands was like, one, that's so annoying because they cost me 25 quid. I could have done that so long ago. But at the same time, it was like, I'm so glad I've done that now because now it's gone up a level. Production quality goes up a level. And then every time I make one of those small changes, and even this week I was recording one. And this is funny because this will come out before this episode, the episode I recorded did probably. All of you that are watching or have had the chance to watch a Mindsets podcast, you'll see that the camera level, it basically gets like a double chin. Like, it's so obvious. Why would I set the camera there? Some people will click on it and be like, why is the camera there? I don't know. The tripod goes to 6 foot. It could be looking down on us. And so what I've changed it, and hopefully people will appreciate this. You don't have to stare at my double chin anymore, or the guests, if it's a bad angle.
Notices that.
Exactly, but this is what happens, and you start to make minor adjustments in each episode, and you end up with a great outcome. But if you aimed for the great outcome first, you'd never get there. Like, it's such a big leap.
Yeah, for sure. It's not with everything. It's like when people become experts in their field, it's because they've made the most mistakes. Like, if you had someone that had a massive podcast and they walked in, they'd be able to spot these instantly. They'd like do that, raise it up higher, because they've made mistakes and answered those individual questions or challenges as they went.
Exactly.
So we might have to do a part 2 because we've only got 20 minutes left. And one, I'd like to dig into more of like the mindset and how the American football thing affects you. But I think we can do that later on, because now we're on your current journey as a podcast host. So the answer to the next question might be the football side of things. But what led you to it? Obviously, you said that you wanted a hobby or something you put your name to that was intrinsically yours and you were wholly responsible for and you put your entire self into.
So yeah, I think just as a prerequisite, by the way, I'm happy to do a part 2. I need to dip in maybe less time than that, sort of five to 10 minutes, but I will definitely stick on this because I think it's, again, ties into what I said before about not really like figuring out as I go and not really knowing what I was getting myself in for. Do you know what? I had started listening to podcasts and I thought they were interesting. Like, I didn't listen to them that much. And then I just started to branch out and listen to some different ones that were quite funny. And I realized that there were also other ones that kind of brought a bit of entertainment, but also some severity and things that you could learn in there. So, I mean, I think one of the first ones I started to listen to, there was 2. There was Shag, Married, Annoyed, which if you've not heard of, it's great. Look it up. It's a couple. One of them is a famous comedian, but then it's now huge. And they basically just give each other shit. And it's hilarious. I really like that. And I probably should start listening to it again because I dropped off it. But the other one at the time was Diary of a CEO. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't listen to it anymore. Obviously, it's been relatively controversial recently with some of the things going on. And yeah, I used to find that really interesting. And I learned from one and I enjoyed the other. And I was thinking, okay, podcasting is its own entity. Never even came into my mind that I'd want to do that. But I had this particular realization about my mental health and attachment to sport while I was in the gym one day, because I had gone to the gym on this Monday in the morning, and I had a really like dead session. Like, there was no energy in it, and like it happens. I've been enough times to know that sometimes you have a shit session. But then I went to work and I had a terrible day at work, and I didn't think anything of it. It was just a really long day. Everything was getting on my nerves, whatever. The next day I went to the gym and I was really looking forward to going to the gym because I could let off all of that steam from yesterday with the bad session and the bad day at work. Great, I'm going into the gym. I had a terrible session that day. And the mood, like, I didn't have a bad day at work on the Tuesday, but my mood made it. And all of a sudden I was in this downward spiral where I couldn't have a good session, which would normally alleviate all the stress. And I was just going down.
Pressure on the session to
exactly
all the
that.
bad sessions previous.
And I remember sitting there in this gym and looking around, and I looked at the people's faces, and no one really looked like they were loving what they were doing. And I don't think I've ever been in the gym like beaming, like with a smile on my face for being there.
Yeah.
But everyone
Not alone.
might have been. Yeah, and I was just like, I'm not the only person with this. I wonder who else is. So I started to talk to some of my friends, mostly that I played with, but also some people from different sport that I went to university with. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I have that all the time. And I was like, cool. Has anyone else asked you about it? And they're like, no, actually, it's an interesting point. Like I go through it all the time, but I've not spoken to anyone about it. And I was just there like, why? Why are we all doing this? Like it's probably all being caused by a similar thing. And then when I thought, it's all being caused by a similar thing, it's not. Having spoken to them further about it, there's so many things that are impacting this. And I was starting to be like, well, there's got to be a way for people to learn off each other. And at first I was like, I could do like, I don't know, short video interviews or something like that. And I was like, no, that seems like a lot of pressure. I'm not the best at editing videos. And again, I started to put those roadblocks in my way, trying to remember the direction of how to get to success. And then, interestingly, the Kelsey brothers started a podcast for the NFL. And I loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
But what I loved the most about it was they were giving a raw, authentic look at what it was like being a professional athlete and the struggles that come with it on a week-to-week basis. And I had already bought a microphone at this point because I knew that I wanted to speak. I just didn't know how I wanted to speak. And so that's when I started this idea of the podcast. And I was like, cool, it's just going to be about mental health and fitness primarily. And I didn't know where it was going to go. I recorded one episode with Dio, and then I recorded another episode with Sam Ruddock, who was a coach at Loughborough, but also as a Paralympic cyclist. And that was great. And then I went traveling, which was a whole different entity. And when I came back, I had kind of realized what I wanted to do with it. And it wasn't actually just to have discussions with people. It was to get a story from different forms of athlete that have gone through very, very different things, and to get bits of advice from them on how they dealt with things, so that other people have an understanding of how to do it as well. But also there's some fundamental things that I'm learning myself. And that's one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much is someone will just come along, sit down in that chair over there, and they will just say something that's so logical and obvious that I've never realized. And I love that, because if I'm getting it out of that, then someone may also get the same. And they might also say something that I'm aware of and I already know. So I'm like, okay, cool. But for someone that's listening, they might be like, and I love that. And I just love being able to share, because every person is so different. The way that everybody thinks is so different. Everybody's athletic background and athletic performance is so different. Some people, as we spoke about with coaching, benefit from being coached in one way. Other people benefit from another way. And getting all of these different perspectives is ultimately one of the best things about it, and why I want to keep doing it. And again, I've said this to a few people. I have never looked at the number of people that download or listen to my podcast. I haven't looked. I don't want to look, because I think I would be, I don't have a goal of what I'd like to have, but I wouldn't want to be disappointed. And most of all, I wouldn't want to track the metrics too much, because I'm so focused on doing the process right that I believe firmly that the results will come. And ultimately,
because it'll take the joy away, like, because you might have really enjoyed a podcast and then you look at it and like, oh.
Yeah, and there have been some really, really good podcasts that I know from, in terms of likes and stuff like that on social media, really didn't do well. One of my favorite podcasts that I did was with an Olympic walker just before Christmas, Tom Bosworth. I genuinely think it might have been one of the best episodes in terms of mental health advice and performance, because the guy has been at the pinnacle of his sport, but has also been at the lowest point you can be in your life. And like, he covered everything in between. And now most people won't click on that one because it's walking, like it's not something that they on paper resonate with. But then once I got into having the conversation with him, as a person that had never tried walking before, I still learned some of the most valuable life lessons I've ever had. Yeah. And like that for me is addictive. So that's why I'm focused on having cool conversations with people, learning about their background. And if anyone else can learn something from it, that's a bonus for me. Yeah. But ultimately I'm doing it because I want to do it.
Yeah, that's very similar to me. Like, I'm just curious. Like, I think that's one of my strengths. Some might say I'm distracted. I'd agree, but I'm so curious. Like, I love learning about random stuff. Like, I woke up this morning, and for some reason, I always used to watch How It's Made. Do you remember that on like the Discovery Channel?
Yeah.
And like, I woke up, and my first like waking thought was like, I know how cars are put together, but how do they make trains? So I was thinking about like steam engines and pistons, and I was like, it's just we'd go down a rabbit hole just following my ADHD brain people. But like, I just want to get life stories, life hacks, and any tips from people that are going on.
Big time.
I would like to ask you one last question, and then we can head. What would you like your legacy to be? Obviously, it seems like a big ego thing that, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm in the pride, but like, even just immediate friends or strangers, like what's your impact on humanity? What do you want it to be?
I just want people to really understand how meaningless life is, which is like the most backwards thing. Okay, like that sounds like the most depressing thing ever, but it really shouldn't be. I will try and keep this short, but basically, I want you to think about the fact that every time you have gone for a job or you've gone to a new level in sport or in education, or any time that you've had to step up to a new level in your life, you've not had a clue how you're supposed to do that. And then when you're in that position, realistically on a day-to-day basis, you're still figuring it out. And no one ever really feels like they could do this thing with their eyes closed. And people say, oh, I could do that with my eyes closed. Could you though? Probably not. And as a result of that, we need to stop living within a shell. And the reason for that is because life is so meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe, right? And it's so cringy and cliche to be like, oh, you're made of stardust and like you're so lucky to be alive. You literally are, though. You're going to be here for 70 to 80 years potentially. If you're lucky, well, maybe not. Maybe if you're unlucky, you'll be here longer. So the things that matter today, and you might be listening to this and thinking, oh, I've not had the best day today. I've not had the best training session. Okay. Can you tell me what was really pissing you off 2 Tuesdays ago? And if you can't, then why are you deeping today so much?
Yeah.
Like long term, these things balance out, and we put so much stress and we get so much anxiety on being the best version of ourselves all the time that life just doesn't become fun anymore. And I often, around my friends and everything like that, I will always be the most immature person. And I will aim to be for the rest of my life, because life is not that serious. Life does not mean that much. If I fuck up, I can apologize. Like that's okay. I could say something to someone that offends them, and I would hope to never do this, but I can apologize and I can make it up to them. What I would rather do is I'd rather do that and make it up and apologize than not just do what I want to do and have fun doing it and live my life, because every little thing you do is meaningless.
Yeah. And there's a reason that those opportunities approach you, whether it's saying something, going somewhere, doing something. Like it's one of those things where so many times you put so many blocks in front of yourself about me, like you said with the, oh, I don't have this equipment, I'm not good at editing.
Yeah, I think basically it comes down to, if you realize how meaningless every individual thing that happens to you is long term, it takes the pressure off it. Like I don't know, like hopefully this doesn't happen. I could go into work tomorrow and lose my job. That is a terrifying situation, because I've got rent to pay, I've got bills to pay, everything like that. Ultimately, though, what will end up happening is I'd probably have to go and get a job at a pub, maybe in a Starbucks or something as well, work a couple of jobs. I'll end up sorting it out. I might have to put the podcast on hold for a brief period of time where I figure things out and get a new job. But like that's probably the worst of it that can happen for me tomorrow. And so I don't want to live in fear of losing my job. I want to do my job the way it is. And if it's not good enough, cool. Something else will happen. I'll figure it out. Like grand scheme of things, if I walked into the office tomorrow and they went, give us your laptop, go home, it's okay. It's meaningless in the grand scheme of things. And having that just takes the fear out of life. Like I'm okay for things to happen to me, and I understand now, because I don't overthink things, that I need to read and react. Like something will happen, cool, long term, not a big issue, let me deal with it.
So I think people have got their priorities wrong. I think that's one of my messages, especially with my clients on ADHD. It's like there's so much pressure that people apply to themselves on doing this, and I'm like, what would you rather not have, your best friend or your job? And some people say their job, but you can get another job. You
Yeah,
can't get
you literally can.
another best friend. Well, you might be able to get it, but like family, friends, you can't replace those, and those memories can't be replaced. You can make more money. You can't buy more life. You can't buy your 20s again. Like, I'm never going to be 21 again.
That film that I can't remember what it's called, like Time, which has got Justin Timberlake in it for some reason, where it's like where you steal time, right? Time is the most valuable thing.
Coffee's like 4 minutes of your life.
So yeah, stop worrying about money. Time is the thing that matters. So stop worrying about these things that you put daily stresses on that in the grand scheme of things are meaningless. If we all woke up tomorrow and the internet just didn't work, we'd all be out of money. Most money is digital, right? But you still have the same amount of time left and you can still do stuff with that. So like focus on that. You know, worry less about the things that you currently put stress on, and don't worry about a lot of things is kind of what I'm trying to say. That's why I'm trying to say it's kind of meaningless, because everything in its individual sense long term doesn't mean a lot. But in a positive way, not in a really negative, depressing way.
I get where you're coming from. Angus, thank you very much for speaking to me today. I really appreciate it. I look forward to finishing the conversation, because there's a lot we need to talk about. We need to go into Britball, and I want you to start naming names, because I'm interested, because I only saw it from an outside perspective and I can completely sympathise with what happened. But thank you for jumping on this podcast, me. Thank you for being the inspiration for me starting this podcast, because you showed me that it can be done, and that it, like, metrics don't matter. It's just about the conversations. And I love what you're doing. It's amazing to think what you've achieved so far, and I've really enjoyed learning more about you. So yeah, thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, mate. I massively appreciate it, and I massively appreciate everyone that's listening. I'll say it for Luke as well, even though you might add an outro or something, but everyone that can support in any way, whether that's a like, share, or follow, like, you genuinely don't understand how much that means. Like, Luke and myself will spend hours and hours editing, and one like genuinely can change our mood and make us so positive for the next one and give us more energy to improve. But also that feedback lets us know what you do like. So if you like something, even a little bit, let us know, because then we can work on that sort of thing, and ultimately grow, tell more stories, share more conversations. So yeah, I think what you're doing is amazing, and I appreciate having the opportunity to jump on.
Cheers, man. Well, I think that's the best place we're going to be able to end it. Hopefully we'll get episode 2 in soon. But yeah, thank you for listening to Luton Podcast, guys. Peace out.